Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the meeting is called to order. To pursue our deliberations under this agenda item, before we proceed with additional country statements, I would first like to call on keynote speakers to address this session. First, may I invite the conference room officer to play the video by Professor Petteri Talas, Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization.
Greetings from the World Meteorological Organization, the specialized agency of UN on weather, climate and water. First, I would like to thank for the opportunity to speak to you and address you at the 77th session of Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Extreme weather conditions and climate conditions have continued into this year. The Asia-Pacific region was especially hard hit by several weather and climate-related hazards like tropical cyclones, especially cyclones and typhoons, floods, droughts, sand and dust storms, and also heat waves. COVID-19 pandemic has caused a global health and economic crisis, which we hope will be time limited. Hopefully, by the end of next year, we would be in better shape. Climate change has the effect of which is intensifying the extreme weather events, and it will lead to water crises, and we will have also sea level rise and melting of glaciers, which is meaning difficulties for water resources in the long run. And failure to mitigate the climate change will have a major negative impact on global economies, human living conditions, and also marine and land ecosystems. And this is not a short-term crisis. It may last up to centuries. So therefore we have to be successful in climate mitigation. And there are good hopes now that things are moving in the right direction, but so far we haven't seen improvement in the real atmosphere. The WMO's annual State of Global Climate report showed that last year was one of the 3 warmest years on record, despite of La Niña cooling in the Pacific Ocean. The economic and industrial downturn as a result of coronavirus pandemic is not a substitute for concerted and coordinated climate action. Experience suggests that emission declines during the economic crisis are followed by a rapid upsurge. We need to change that trajectory. The world needs to demonstrate the same unity and commitment to climate action and cutting greenhouse gas emissions as to containing the coronavirus pandemic. We can tackle this problem with much less impacts on everyday human life, whereas if we fail with the climate mitigation, that will be a persistent problem for several generations. Now is the time to consider how to use the economic stimulus packages to support a long-term switch to more environmentally and climate-friendly business and personal practices. Dear participants, although countries across the region have committed to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 to ensure that no one is left behind, this will remain a challenge if the populations remain skeptical to disasters that threaten to hinder or indeed set back progress. Building more resilient societies to weather and climate extremes remains an imperative and a necessary condition to progress towards sustainable development. To build back better through regional cooperation in Asia and Pacific, WMO is driving several important initiatives in collaboration with our partners to better support our members in these efforts. First of all, we have a major challenge that we have gaps in our observing systems, especially on the Pacific Islands, Caribbean islands, Africa and some parts of Latin America, and also some parts of Southern Asia. And that's why we have established systematic observation financing facility SOF, which will support the generation of an exchange of basic surface weather and climate observations for improved weather forecasts, climate information and early warnings globally, regionally, nationally and locally. And without the data, the quality of the early warning services remains very poor, especially in the data sparse areas. Secondly, most of the impacts of climate change, they are felt through water. And that's why we are creating a climate and water coalition for accelerating action on Sustainable Development Goal 6 to strengthen water and climate action at the country level. This coalition targets investments in water data infrastructure and services to reduce impacts from water-related disasters and impacts of climate change. Third, WMO would like to enhance the multi-hazard early warning system and services of all our member countries. Among others, keep promoting climate risk and early warning systems initiative called CRUISE, which supports development of early warning systems in LDC and SIDS countries to minimize loss of life and economic impacts from climate and weather-related events. These capacity development initiatives complement existing WMO technical activities aimed at enhancing regional capabilities in weather and climate-related areas. For instance, WMO collaborates with the regional partners in organizing regional climate outlook fora in East Asia, Southeast Asia and the Pacific, which produce user-relevant climate outlook products to reduce climate-related risks. WMO believes these efforts will better support countries in their transition to impact-based services. We need to, besides forecasting the meteorological parameters, we have to also forecast the impacts of those factors, and that's very much missing. This will see a fundamental shift from focusing what the weather will be to what the weather will do. The aim is to ensure that end users of these services are more prepared for and less vulnerable to hydrometeorological hazards than ever before. Dear participants, WMO looks forward to continued cooperation with ESCAP and its member states in advancing progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. We hope to achieve WMO's vision that by 2030 we will see a world where all nations, especially most vulnerable ones, are more resilient to the socio-economic consequences of extreme weather, climate, water and other environmental events and underpin their sustainable development through the best possible services, whether over land, at sea or in the air. With that, I look forward to fruitful discussions. I would like to wish you happy and you all happy and safe meeting, and thanks for the opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Next, may I invite the conference room officer to play the video by Ms. Marie Elka Pangestu, Managing Director of the World Bank.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues, it's a pleasure for me to address the 77th session of ESCAP. We are meeting at a time of unprecedented challenges. The economic crisis because of the pandemic is, as we know, causing the worst recession in world history. Over 120 million people have fallen back to extreme poverty, and many more are facing increased food insecurity and worsening inequality. The outlook for developing countries are divergent and remains uncertain. The crisis came on top of persistent development challenges that existed pre-pandemic, including climate change, conflict, increasing debt levels, and falling investment and productivity. Against this backdrop, the World Bank has provided a record surge in our programs, with 65% increase in our commitments in 2020, and a total of 100 billion, the largest on record. This includes financing to support the private sector through short-term liquidity and trade, through IFC and MIGA, and COVID-19 related emergency health programs in 112 countries that we have delivered in close collaboration with UN agencies. In the immediate term, fair, broad, and fast vaccine deployment is our priority, as this is the key for economic recovery. At least 144 countries, including in the Asia and the Pacific, have completed vaccine readiness assessments, which we conducted in coordination with Gavi, the Global Fund, WHO, and UNICEF. The World Bank has allocated $12 billion for vaccine procurement and deployment, whilst at the same time strengthening health systems. To date, we have committed $2 billion for COVID vaccines across 17 countries, with a total expected to reach at least 4 billion and 50 countries by mid-year. Other than supporting our continued health and vaccine response, at the World Bank IMF Spring meetings earlier this month, our shareholders also endorsed continuing our work to alleviate the debt burdens of developing countries, which is needed to provide the fiscal space for their response and recovery efforts. We welcome the G20 debt service suspension initiative, which has been extended for 6 months, and we are working with the IMF on the G20 Common Framework for Debt Resolution and providing net transfers to IDA and LDC countries of close to $17 billion, of which almost $6 billion were on grant terms. Shareholders also endorsed our path forward. Moving forward to build back better and build back differently, we are adopting a green, resilient, and inclusive development framework, or GRID, which responds to the twin crises of COVID and climate, whilst ensuring we meet the SDGs. The GRID will require urgent investments at scale and policy reforms to transform key systems which contribute 90% of greenhouse gas emissions, such as energy, food systems and land use, urban infrastructure, transport, and manufacturing. The scale of the needs, as well as the opportunities, requires exceptional support from the international community, and the World Bank Group is doing its part. To that end, the World Bank Group has received support for replenishment of IDA 20 that will help the world's poorest countries, and it has also updated its climate change action plan by putting forward ambitious new targets for climate financing, not just for mitigation, but also for adaptation and resilience. The plan is not just about climate action, but how to integrate climate in development. And we will be expanding our diagnostics and supporting countries with the development and design and implementation of their NDCs and long-term low-carbon development strategies. We are also aligning our financing flows with the goals of the Paris Agreement. For the World Bank, we plan to align all new operations by July 1, 2023, and for IFC and MIGA, it will be July 1, 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity for the World Bank to share our thoughts, our updates, and our way forward. And we certainly look forward to continuing to work with all of you for a green, resilient, and inclusive future for all of us. Thank you.
Now, may I invite the conference room officer to play the video by Mr. David Wallerstein, Chief Exploration Officer and Senior Executive Vice President, Tencent.
Hi, I'm David Wallerstein, and I'd like to thank you for having me speak with you today. I'm the Chief Exploration Officer of Tencent. Today is a great opportunity to discuss how we should be thinking about emerging from this pandemic and revitalizing our economies and our societies and our environments around us coming out of this. What have we learned? First of all, I think actually the world can learn a lot from how the Asia-Pacific region responded to COVID. And it seems that those who are coming out of it are really in two camps. One are those countries who contained well, like the Asia-Pacific nations, basically by shutting down borders and then initiating all kinds of measures inside your countries to keep the pandemic at bay. And then those countries that are vaccinating now as the second category. I do feel at the end of the day, getting vaccines distributed globally is essential. But as we open up, now we think about the other challenges on the horizon. And today I'd just like to offer to everyone a framework that we've been talking more about at Tencent. We've been talking a lot about a framework called FEW, F-E-W, food, energy, and water. You can evaluate the relative resilience of an area based on their ability to be prepared for few issues and few challenges. In most all countries around the world, agriculture is the single biggest consumer of water, sometimes up to 70%, usually between 40 and 70%, depending on the nation, and depending on that nation's water dependency for energy, which is also the other usual biggest category for those nations that are whose energy resources, like thermoelectric power, are water dependent. And when you start solving for one of these areas, you make the other areas more resilient. It's kind of a triangular relationship where strengthening of any one can strengthen the others. And when you think about climate change, in my view, it really is about food, energy, and water. We need to find ways to optimize our usage, to become more efficient, more resourceful, less wasteful, and strategic in how we actually address the relationship between these areas. We've already been able to demonstrate pretty decisively the power of artificial intelligence when applied to both indoor and outdoor agriculture. I think the evidence for this is quite clear that you can optimize the amount of water that we deliver to plants and other resources while actually improving the health and the productivity of those plants. We're looking at developing these types of solutions now, artificial intelligence solutions, for energy optimization, whereas you may have a certain objective, such as a space heating or cooling objective. And if you can intelligently optimize any energy used in that process that achieves that temperature result, you can experience tremendous savings. And this is no secret in many parts of the Asia-Pacific region that are very warm and benefit significantly from air conditioning, as we all know. And what is further exciting is the ability to develop these kinds of intelligent technologies that help us operate the infrastructure around us in our everyday lives. But the important thing is to encourage this kind of technological exploration to occur in the first place, because it can't happen in a vacuum. It can't happen in isolation. They need to work with parties in the energy field, parties working on water utilities, and farmers, those working in agriculture and serving farmers. And those are the types of dynamics that are at play whenever you're implementing a software-based solution. There's a lot of potential for us to deploy these types of software-based solutions in a way that drives efficiencies and can achieve great benefits, but also moves fast. This is another tool in our toolkit, another type of solution that we have available to humanity that we hope can be fully explored. So I leave you with these thoughts today, and I hope next time we're able to have this discussion in person. Thank you for having me. Best wishes.
I now open the floor for more country statements. The first speaker is Turkmenistan, His Excellency Muhammad Geldi Sardarov, Minister of Finance and Economy of Turkmenistan, to be followed by Georgia and Iran. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, позвольте выразить признательность за возможность принять участие в работе 77-й сессии СКАТа и пожелать всем участникам успешной работы. Надежное и устойчивое восстановление экономики стран СКАТа после пандемии COVID-19, а также достижение СУР до 2030 года будет возможно лишь в том случае, если будут обеспечены дополнительные инвестиции в экономическую, социальную и экологическую устойчивость. Во многих государствах региона ESCAP наблюдается нарастающий дефицит сырьевых и энергетических ресурсов, волатильность цен на товарных рынках. Усиливается загрязнение окружающей среды за счет выбросов парниковых газов, повышение температуры и загрязнение различным отходом морских акваторий. Это может оказать влияние на необратимость климатических изменений. Поддерживая усилия международного сообщества по снижению объема выбросов парниковых газов, Туркменистан переходит к использованию современных экологически чистых и ресурсосберегающих технологий в промышленности и на транспорте. Особенно это касается нефтегазовой и энергетической отраслей. Целью нашего низкоуглеродного развития является достижение стабилизации роста выбросов или даже начало снижения их объема при благоприятных экономических условиях к 2030 году. Наша страна следует курсу низкоуглеродного развития экономики, что соответствует долгосрочной глобальной цели не превысит к 2050 году 2-градусного уровня увеличения средней глобальной температуры воздуха по сравнению с доиндустриальным периодом. Туркменистан разделяет озабоченность международного сообщества в связи с глобальным изменением климата. Принята и успешно реализуется национальная стратегия Туркменистана по изменению климата, национальная лесная программа. В целях предотвращения дефляционных процессов опустынивания продолжается работа по закреплению песков вдоль трасс автомобильных магистралей и железных дорог, озеленению столицы и региональных центров Туркменистана. В целях улучшения экологической обстановки в стране, снижения негативного влияния на нее пыли природного характера проводится работа по созданию парковых и лесопарковых зон. Только в 2020 году в нашей стране посажено 25 миллионов саженцев деревьев. Наша страна уже достигла значительных результатов в плане реализации целей устойчивого развития и продолжает активно проводить комплексные мероприятия, ориентированные на развитие рыночных отношений, диверсификацию и повышение конкурентоспособности экономики, развитие транспорта, транзитных коридоров, внедрение цифровых систем. В условиях пандемии нам удалось сохранить стабильность экономического развития, не останавливать работу отраслей. По итогам 2020 года и в текущем году темп экономического роста поддерживается на уровне 5,9%. Этому во многом способствуют меры фискального стимулирования отраслей экономики, а также социальной защиты населения. Кроме того, были приняты меры, направленные на сохранение стабильности финансового сектора. В целях обеспечения устойчивости и создания новых рабочих мест приняты изменения в Трудовой кодекс, предусматривающие новые положения по защите рабочих мест в условиях глобальной пандемии. В части стимулирования развития отраслей экономики и продвижения экспорта в августе 2020 года Туркменистан ратифицировал 6 транспортных конвенций Европейской экономической комиссии ООН. Была отменена обязательная сертификация экспорта по 18 видам товаров. Туркменистан присоединился к Международной конвенции об упрощении и гармонизации таможенных процедур. Важным событием прошлого года стало также вступление Туркменистана во Всемирную торговую организацию. В целях улучшения восстановления экономики государств ESCAP после пандемии Туркменистан выступает за ускорение выполнения решений Адис-Абебейской программы действий по финансированию развития для мобилизации и эффективного использования ресурсов, требуемых для достижения СУР. В рамках работ 75-й сессии Генассамблеи наша страна инициировала возможность проведения в 2022 году конференции ООН по финансированию развития. В заключение хотел бы пожелать всем участникам встречи здоровья и процветания государств ESCAP. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you. The next speaker is Georgia, His Excellency Alexander Kivtisiashvili, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, to be followed by Iran and then India. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, it is my honor to be part of this significant event and address such a distinguished audience. The main idea of today's meeting is building back from crisis through regional cooperation. And we are truly standing at a very important momentum when involvement of all nations for better future is required. COVID-19 pandemic represents enormous global challenge when addressing of it is possible only with the solidarity and close cooperation of all nations. Georgia was no exemption from global tendency when pandemic has interrupted everyday life practically in all directions. Especially the pandemic damaged positive and steady economic growth. Because of global economic slowdown, our GDP growth rate dropped by 6% and foreign trade narrowed by 20% last year. But despite all, Georgia has approved and managed to start implementing anti-crisis economic plan for different sectors of economy, facilitating steady economic recovery and development. During the last year, Georgia has managed to arrange to provide most public services online, facilitated online education, including introduction of TV lessons, and supported online trade tools almost for all goods. Notwithstanding internal challenges caused by the pandemic, Georgia is actively implementing international agenda. Due to its strategic location as bridge between Europe and Asia, Georgia involved in close cooperation with the Asia-Pacific region to facilitate greater broadband and transport connectivity, exchange of data, facilitation movement of innovations, and of course trade. We want to highlight that during the COVID-19 crisis, transit borders of Georgia continued to provide all the services with a specially designed formula facilitating smooth movement of goods by air, rail, and road. In addition, for better protection, the blockchain system is widely used to ensure security of data, affordability, and security of data exchange. As we are witnessing development of data-driven economy, Georgia is ready to facilitate data movement and transmission between Europe and Asia through its territory. Georgia actively collaborates with a number of countries in the West and the East to implement several multi-regional, very important projects. To provide more regional development security globally, Georgia is actively participating in joint energy projects when oil, gas, and electricity is flowing through Georgia to international markets. Given the existing situation, it is undeniable that the pandemic is a significant challenge to the Sustainable Development Goals. We strongly believe that despite the challenging situation, the SDGs will remain as one of the top priorities in the political and economic agenda of Georgia, where implementation of SDGs targets are essential and decisive for the future development and welfare for all. We all call for all nations to be devoted to the SDG implementation process and make world better with our mutual devotion and action. As we will observe, new reality creating some new opportunities as well, and we have to use these new opportunities in best way for the timely rehabilitation of the global economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I understand we're having some technical difficulty with Iran, so we now proceed with India. Ambassador Suchitra Durai, Ambassador and Permanent Representative to ESCAP, to be followed by France and then Papua New Guinea. Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, we are pleased to participate in the 77th Commission session of the UN ESCAP and share India's perspective on the theme, Building Back Better from Crisis Through Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. This session is timely and the chosen theme is most relevant. The COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented health crisis that has impacted the entire world. The fallout of the pandemic has been an unexpected and overwhelming shock to the global economy, resulting in a sharp decline in economic activity and widespread loss of jobs and livelihoods, especially for the marginalized sections. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of inclusive and equitable development that is sustainable. It has also exposed the vulnerabilities of global trade and supply chains and thus brought the importance of regional cooperation in focus. Global recovery is only possible with successful containment of the pandemic and concerted and collaborative action on the economic front. The Asian Pacific region could provide decisive leadership in this regard. Madam Chair, India's response to the pandemic, both on the health and economic front, has been comprehensive and carefully calibrated, encompassing both short-term and long-term measures. To address the disruption in economic activity, Government of India announced a series of reforms aimed at strengthening the investment climate and boosting manufacturing activity. A fiscal and economic stimulus package amounting to more than 13% of India's GDP was rolled out. The Reserve Bank of India has also taken several measures for augmenting liquidity. As already mentioned by previous speakers, COVID-19 pandemic has hit the informal economy hardest and millions of enterprises are suffering worldwide. Collective efforts are therefore imperative to strengthen efforts to address poverty and deprivation caused by the pandemic. Madam Chair, governments across the globe have scaled up their efforts on the healthcare management front. India has been at the forefront in this fight. As a leading drug manufacturer, it has worked assiduously to ensure availability of critical medicines to over 150 countries. Under the Vaccine Maitri or the Vaccine Friendship Initiative, India has made available vaccines to more than 80 countries and has also supplied to Gavi's COVAX facility. 200,000 doses have also been gifted for UN peacekeepers. India has also called for WTO to suspend IPRs related to COVID-19 vaccines for a limited period of time for rapid scaling up of manufacturing. There is a need to strengthen collaborative efforts to ensure expeditious and equitable distribution of vaccines globally. Madam Chair, the pandemic has caused great disruption in global trade and supply chains. India has taken a slew of trade facilitative measures that have been instrumental in reducing drastically the time and costs of various procedures and compliances. Additional reforms are being envisioned. Enhanced regional connectivity and trade opportunities can spur growth and provide the necessary momentum to economic recovery in the region. India is of the view that such initiatives must be based on universally recognized international norms, good governance, financial responsibility, rule of law, openness, transparency, and equality. As regards the SDGs related to climate action and affordable and clean energy, India has encouraged global initiatives, including the International Solar Alliance. On its part, India has also set up an ambitious renewable energy target of 450 gigawatts by 2030. In conclusion, Madam Chair, even as India is battling a second wave, it is our belief that this pandemic can be successfully contained through collective action by countries in the region and outside. A strong collaborative effort based on the principles of equity and inclusivity will not only help in successfully overcoming this crisis, but also catapult the Asian Pacific region on a trajectory of rapid and sustainable economic growth and well-being. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. The next speaker is France, Ambassador and Permanent Representative to ESCAP, His Excellency Thierry Matou, to be followed by Papua New Guinea and then United States of America. Excellency, you have the floor. You may start, Excellency.
Thank you, Excellence. Madame la secrétaire exécutive, mesdames et messieurs, chers collègues, j'ai l'honneur de m'exprimer pour la première fois au sein de cette enceinte, occasion pour moi de souligner, de dire l'importance que lui attache la France dans le cadre de l'espace Indo-Pacifique dont le président Emmanuel Macron a fait une priorité. La CESAP joue un rôle fondamental en matière de développement économique et social, en lien avec l'agenda 2030 de développement durable pour renforcer la présence des Nations Unies dans cette partie du monde. Afin de surmonter la crise actuelle et de prévenir de futures crises, afin de construire des économies et des sociétés durables, inclusives et résilientes, la coopération internationale et le recours au multilatéralisme ne sont pas des options, mais des impératifs. C'est l'esprit de la stratégie pour l'Indo-Pacifique mise en œuvre par la France depuis 2018, en lien avec nos partenaires de la région, notamment l'Australie, l'Inde, le Japon et l'ASEAN, dont la Thaïlande qui nous accueille. Une stratégie qui s'appuie en particulier sur la mobilisation de l'Agence française de développement et des principaux centres et instituts de recherche français implantés dans la région. Fière d'être une nation de l'Indo-Pacifique, la France s'enorgueillit également d'être membre fondateur de la CESAP, dont nous célébrerons l'année prochaine le 75e anniversaire, et d'avoir noué avec l'ASEAN, qui occupe une position centrale au sein de cette région, un partenariat de développement officiellement lancé en mars dernier. Dans ces enceintes, la défense du multilatéralisme se conjugue étroitement avec la promotion des enjeux globaux, en particulier le climat, la biodiversité, le développement durable et la santé. Pleinement consciente des défis géopolitiques, sécuritaires, environnementaux et commerciaux du monde aujourd'hui qui se jouent dans cette vaste région, la France, puissance d'équilibre, a été à l'initiative, avec d'autres pays européens, d'une stratégie européenne ambitieuse pour l'Indo-Pacifique qui devrait voir le jour d'ici la fin de cette année, afin de contribuer à la stabilité, à la sécurité, à la prospérité et au développement durable de notre région, en s'appuyant sur la promotion de la démocratie, de l'état de droit, des droits de l'homme et du droit international. Le Conseil de l'Union européenne a adopté des conclusions dans ce sens le 19 avril dernier. À l'heure où l'Asie-Océanie traverse sa pire crise depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale, des efforts redoublés doivent être fournis collectivement pour vaincre la pandémie actuelle et prévenir la survenance d'une future crise qui bouleverserait à nouveau nos économies, nos sociétés et nos vies quotidiennes. C'est pour cette raison que la France a coporté l'initiative ACT-A dans le cadre de l'OMS pour garantir par une approche de bien public mondial un accès équitable aux traitements et aux vaccins contre la Covid-19 à de nombreux pays de la région ayant rejoint la facilité COVAX. C'est aussi pour cette raison que la France a porté l'initiative PRESOD, lancée lors du One Planet Summit qui s'est tenu à Paris en janvier dernier, pour prévenir de nouvelles crises issues de réservoirs animaux grâce à une coopération internationale inédite associant déjà plus de 1000 chercheurs issus de 50 pays. À l'échelle de l'espace Indo-Pacifique, la CESAP apparaît comme l'enceinte multilatérale la plus adaptée pour faire face aux grands défis auxquels sera confrontée la région dans les prochaines années. Le changement climatique et la dégradation environnementale, la connectivité durable, les nouvelles technologies ou encore la santé. Dans ce domaine, la France, qui a initié avec l'Allemagne un panel d'experts de haut niveau, Une seule santé, One Health, plaide pour le développement d'une action de la CESAP orientée vers cette approche intégrée qui étudie les interactions entre santé humaine, animale et environnementale afin de prévenir l'émergence de futures crises et de pandémies. Plus que jamais, l'engagement des États dans le multilatéralisme et la défense des enjeux globaux sera indispensable pour réussir à construire un monde plus juste, plus équilibré, plus soutenable. La France est déterminée à se mobiliser pour apporter de manière concrète sa contribution à cette ambition collective que nous avons vocation à porter ensemble dans la région. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Franz, for your statement. The next speaker is Papua New Guinea High Commissioner and Permanent Representative to ESCAP, Mr. Peter Vincent. to be followed by the USA and then Australia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored on behalf of the government of Papua New Guinea to deliver the country statement on this very significant occasion of the 77th session of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. In regards to the Commission's theme on building back better from the crisis through regional cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. Let me also take this opportunity to congratulate Madam Secretary on her leadership in shaping the hard work and commitment of all those involved in ensuring this year's Commission sessions delivers a successful outcome. The 77th session of the Commission provides an opportunity for us to work together as members of the Asia-Pacific regional community to share experiences and discuss way forward to consolidate regional cooperation during this unprecedented time to build back our societies and economies better, more resilient, stronger, and sustainable. Excellencies, the coronavirus pandemic has triggered one of the worst global health, social, and economic crises in Asia and the Pacific.
Actually, also Azerbaijan.
Second World War.
Actually, Azerbaijan.
We admit that the pandemic has rolled back our collective progress towards achieving our shared vision for an equitable, resilient, and sustainable future. We have witnessed and experienced one of the most distressing health and economic consequences across the region and globally. Developing LLDCs and LDCs are hit hard by economic contractions resulting from the restrictions and reactionary protectionist measures imposed by countries globally during the pandemic. The vaccination program is proven to be a more crucial and prudent public health interventions in creating herd immunity against viral diseases and preventing their spread. As such, our collective efforts to ensure a significant number of our population receives the vaccine must not be hampered by domestic and regional politics. Papua New Guinea joins the region in calling for more equitable, fair distribution of vaccines so that countries can work towards returning to normal. Excellencies, Papua New Guinea, like many other developing and least developed countries, coupled with a narrow tax base and revenue generating capacity, responded early by tweaking and adjusting its monetary and fiscal policies to ensure the economy can respond to the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, especially around the cash flow constraints caused by the restrictions imposed by the pandemic. Adjusting monetary policies to respond to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is crucial to maintain financial and payment system stability and provide ample liquidity to individual and business at a reasonable cost when people and business are hit hard by the restriction imposed to control the spread of the virus. Papua New Guinea introduced and maintained seven monetary policy measures since April 2020 to respond to shocks of COVID-19 pandemic. The reduction in the Keynote facilities rate further eases the monetary policy by lowering the cost of funds and making liquidity available to commercial banks during the pandemic period so they can reciprocate by reducing their respective indicator lending rates. The Central Bank of Papua New Guinea has reduced its cash reserves requirement by 3% from the current level of 10% to provide a significant additional liquidity to the banking system. Other potential measures, including loan repayment holidays on MSMEs and all businesses, as well as foreign exchange interventions to direct foreign exchange dealings, to give priority to retailers and wholesalers of pharmaceuticals and health products, particularly the import of products relating to deal with the COVID-19 health crisis. Excellencies, the challenges around financing to building back better are insuperable to developing landlocked developing and least developed countries who are hit hard by the economic shocks of the pandemic. But by effective regional cooperation, we can overcome these challenges and build back together. Disruptions to key economic sectors, especially travel restrictions, have hit hard the tourism sector, resulting in loss of revenue and job causing rippling effect, further expanding the inequality gap and increased poverty in the societies. Papua New Guinea has joined the Pacific sub-region in working on measures to ensure movement of people and resources are restored, but through strengthened standard procedures. There is a significant drop in the gross domestic product across the region and individually. Small developing to least developed countries have experienced drastic drops in revenue generation due to interruptions to trade flow of liquid capital across border and halting of major foreign direct investment activities across borders. With a small financial market to source domestic financial support and providing stimulus package to the business community, many of these special need countries would need the backing of regional and international financial institutions to provide concessional financial support. Excellencies, Papua New Guinea's tax to GDP ratio from 2018 to 2020 was maintained at 12.1%, which is significantly low compared to the size of the country. However, the COVID-19 imposed contractions to the economy has prompted the government to adjust its tax collection. The introduction of the integrated finance management system into tax administration has improved the tax collection process, reducing the cumbersome processes and patching leaks in tax collection system by integrating the data of every taxpayer. PNG Papua New Guinea echoes the call made by LLDCs and LDCs and SIDs for continued support of regional institutions to provide technical assistance to customize policy development in the areas of regulatory and monitoring functions to improve and strengthen the tax administration regimes so countries can strengthen their revenue generating Excellency, in closing, Papua New Guinea is appreciative of the crucial supportive role UN system, especially the ESCAP, plays, assisting member states in the Asia-Pacific region to work towards building back from the shocks of the coronavirus pandemic. Papua New Guinea remains committed to the Secretariat's leadership in the region in supporting our collective and national efforts and reiterate our commitment to strengthen the regional cooperation in the region. I thank you.
Thank you, Papua New Guinea, for your statement. The next speaker is USA, Her Excellency Narisa Cook, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Bureau of International Organization Affairs, U.S. Department of State, to be followed by Australia and then Malaysia. Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here with you today. The United States is committed to the Asia-Pacific region and to working with you to address our most pressing issues, beating back the COVID-19 pandemic, fostering a resilient and inclusive economic recovery, and addressing climate change. The global COVID-19 pandemic and its socio-economic devastation this past year have shown that good governance at all levels matters, that transparency and accountability matter, and that addressing structural problems, including inequality, matter. Faced with a global health crisis of unprecedented proportions, the people of the United States are proud to support the international COVAX vaccine facility. We have already contributed an initial $2 billion and are committed to providing an additional $2 billion contribution through 2022. We urge current donors to fulfill their pledges and call on others to contribute to address the COVID-19 vaccine funding shortfall. We know the pandemic has caused not only tragic loss of life, but significant loss of livelihoods. To enable a sustained economic recovery, we are supportive of exploring a new $650 billion allocation of special drawing rights at the International Monetary Fund. These resources have the potential to enhance global reserve liquidity, particularly among low-income countries. Unfortunately, these economic disruptions have not spared the import and tourism-dependent island economies. The White House recently announced an economic cooperation framework designed to strengthen U.S. collaboration with island countries and territories in the Caribbean, North Atlantic, and Pacific regions, the Small and Less Populous Island Economies Initiative, or SALPI. This initiative marshals resources from across the U.S. government to strengthen island economies vulnerable to the economic shocks of COVID-19 and to respond to climate change. But a permanent economic recovery will not be possible without addressing the outsized impact the pandemic has had on women. Many women have exited the market as they are forced to choose between compensated work and the unpaid labor of caring for loved ones. Women will be critical to driving the global economic response, and the United States is committed to supporting them at home and abroad. Through the 2X Gender Lens Investing Initiative, we have catalyzed more than $7 billion of investment in women-owned and women-led businesses that offer products or services that empower women. Finally, by addressing the climate crisis, we will revitalize our economies, create millions of good jobs, and build sustainable infrastructure. That is why the United States held a Leaders Summit on climate and is placing energy transformation and just transition policies at the heart of economic development and diplomacy, and accelerating clean energy technology deployment. The pandemic has laid bare the vulnerabilities in our interconnected world. But to build a world beyond COVID that is inclusive, resilient, and green, we must work together to deliver a sustained global response. The United States looks forward to working with you to address these and many other issues that face the region. Thank you.
Thank you, USA. The next speaker is Australia. Permanent Representative to ESCAP, Mr. Paul Stephens, to be followed by Malaysia and then Iran. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The past 12 months have been challenging globally, including for the Indo-Pacific region. Undoubtedly, COVID-19 has slowed progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Health systems were stretched, job losses spiked, and poverty increased. Trade declined, supply chains were disrupted, and the movement of people slowed, putting economies under great stress. Meetings such as this 77th Commission session of ESCAP are now more important than ever to build our common agenda towards inclusive and sustainable development in our region. As we know, the impacts of crises have a greater effect on those who are already disadvantaged, particularly women and girls, people with disabilities, and other marginalised and vulnerable groups. We all need to ensure that responses to COVID-19 continue to focus on supporting the most vulnerable. Rates of gender-based violence are increasing, and people with disabilities who already face multiple levels of exclusion will be particularly vulnerable as health and other social services are disrupted. Australia also has suffered the effects of COVID-19 with nearly 30,000 cases and 910 deaths. Over 1 million Australians lost their jobs or had their working hours reduced to zero, while underemployment also rose. Although the Australian economy is showing signs of recovery, full economic recovery will depend on the reopening of international borders, normalisation of trade and the free movement of people. As the international community responds to the impacts of COVID-19, regional and multilateral cooperation remain vital. Australia underscores the importance of the United Nations and other agencies working together to build back better and to implement reforms that ensure that these organisations are fit for purpose, effective, open, transparent, and accountable to member states. Additionally, we should continue to look for opportunities to leverage other sources of finance and expertise, such as the Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, the Global Fund, and Gavi. The Indo-Pacific is Australia's home, which is why Australia reshaped our development program to establish a new COVID-19 response and recovery partnership with the region. The pivot will ensure Australia's development partnerships become even more relevant and responsive to partner countries' needs, focused on supporting our region's health security, economic recovery, and stability. Underscoring the importance of regional and multilateral cooperation, Australia is proud to have supported the COVAX facility to improve access to safe, effective, and affordable COVID-19 vaccines for 92 countries in our region and around the world. This is in addition to Australia's landmark regional vaccines initiative focused on Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Australia is also working through other multilateral mechanisms, such as the Quad, to increase vaccine supply and support effective delivery in the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia, for your statement. The next speaker is Malaysia. Deputy Chief of Mission and Minister and Permanent Representative to ESCAP, Ms. Suzila Binti Mohammed Sidek, to be followed by Iran and then Armenia. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused great disruption to the world and affected not only our public health system, but also the economy and social institutions of our country. The implementation of measures to contain the outbreak, such as movement control or lockdown, disrupted our daily life and resulted in increased inequality. To mitigate such impacts, Malaysia has begun the implementation of economic recovery strategies, including stimulus packages valued at approximately $83 billion, the equivalent of more than 20% of Malaysia's GDP. This involved a fiscal injection of $13 billion and were announced in stages over a period of 12 months. The strategies entailed a series of assistance and aid, particularly for lower income vulnerable groups, as well as to encourage community investment. Thus far, more than 20 million people and 2.4 million businesses have benefited directly from this. The 2021 national budget further supports our economic recovery efforts.
Sorry, Malaysia. I'm so sorry. We cannot hear you clearly, Malaysia. I'm sorry.
2.4 million jobs.
Malaysia.
Cash flow concerns.
I'm sorry, Malaysia. We cannot hear you clearly.
From the lower and income groups through cash assistance. Madam Chair, in terms of access to vaccination, Malaysia strongly believes that it is a human right and must be made a global good that must be respected, protected, and fulfilled. Once a vaccine is developed, international collaboration outweighs nationalistic competition. Equitable access is also important. Malaysia's national COVID-19 immunization program would take place in stages, aims to provide COVID-19 vaccination free of charge to cover about 80% of its adult population by February 2022, regardless of their nationality or immigration status. This is in line with Malaysia's policy of assuring affordable and equitable access to vaccines for all. Madam Chair, realizing the importance of accelerating the shift into a digitalized economy, Malaysia launched My Digital Economy Blueprint, which complements our 12th Malaysia Plan, as well as the vision for Shared Prosperity 2030. The initiative seeks to propel a digitally enabled government, empower business to innovate, and help bridge the literacy and social well-being. We believe much more needs to be done to soften the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, Malaysia hopes that the ESCAP and the wider membership would continue to share best practices, knowledge, recommendations, and technical expertise through capacity building, particularly in the opening of borders to promote connectivity, trade and tourism among countries, and in enhancing member state capacity to address SDG data gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Malaysia, for your statement. The next speaker is Iran. His Excellency Dr. Syed Hamid Pur Mohammadi, Deputy for Economic Affairs and Plan and Budget Coordination, Plan and Budget Organization, to be followed by Armenia and then Azerbaijan. Iran, please.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful. Mr. Chairman, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate His Excellency Mukhtar Taliyoverdi for being elected as the chair of the 77th session of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. I would also like to extend my utmost gratitude to Her Excellency Alish Jabana, Deputy Secretary General and the Executive Secretary of ESCAP and her staff in the Secretariat for organizing this important meeting. Excellencies, the experience learned from the COVID-19 pandemic remind us once again that any effective response to a disaster as such requires no less than a unified action for all governments and nations in the region and beyond. This global pandemic, which has imposed unprecedented human losses and socio-economic damages on nations and communities, must be dealt with shared responsibility and joint efforts on regional and international levels. Therefore, it is an imperative for all countries and stakeholders to share these capacities, resources, and knowledge with others who are in need in order to overcome this global crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, the Islamic Republic of Iran has taken a number of fundamental measures to mitigate the risk and negative impacts of the current crisis resulting from the pandemic. However, my government is facing with a number of challenges which have hampered it from sustainable implementation of the national plans and programs, not only in combating against the pandemic, but also in its efforts to recover from it as it is deemed required for the development programs. Financing health national program, including transfers for vaccine purchases and production and other medical medicine and equipment is one of the most challenging ones in this context due to unprecedented unilateral coercive measures and illegitimate unilateral sanctions against my country. Ladies and gentlemen, the Islamic Republic of Iran is committed to multilateral and regional and international cooperation aiming at enhancing capacities and building resilience of countries and people against disaster and crisis. The Islamic Republic of Iran is committed to continue its support to the programs and activities of the Asia and the Pacific Center for Development of Disaster Information Management, APDI, as a regional institution of ESCAP. In a short period from its establishment, owing to the generous voluntary contribution by my government to APTEAM amounting more than $5 million. APTEAM has been able to successfully expand its activities and services at regional level. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I'm pleased to inform you that my government has a wide range of areas of cooperation with ESCAP and its member states, including inter alia, the paperless trade framework agreement, road safety, dry port and tripolation highways, road, rail, and information. It is worth mentioning considerable measures have been taken in regards to the disaster-related areas and international and national level. A new comprehensive legislation and national strategy for disaster risk reduction and management has been adopted by which disaster risk reduction integrates into development policies and plans, including in the 7th five-year National Development Plan. It gives the opportunity to my governments to strengthen and expand its regional and international cooperation and joint initiatives and at different levels. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Azerbaijan, Mr. Emil Amadov, Leading Advisor, Department of International Cooperation, Ministry of Transport, Communications, and High Technologies, to be followed by Hong Kong, China, and pending our connection with some country delegations, perhaps we could also proceed to open the floor for organizations that have registered to speak under this agenda item. The next in line should be Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. So Azerbaijan, you have the floor now. Thank you.
Madam Chair, my voice is clear.
Yes, you may proceed.
Yes. Madam Chair, Madam Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates. First of all, allow me to congratulate you, Madam Chair, on your assumption as a chairperson of 77th Session Commission. And I am confident that under your leadership, this session will be able to complete its proceedings successfully. Madam Chair, the themes of today's session is very timely because reports released by ESCAP demonstrates that the Asia-Pacific region has emerged as a fastest growing region over the past. On the other hand, this dynamic development has been accompanied by rising inequality, which poses significant challenge to international community in realizing SDGs within the set timeline. Azerbaijan attached great importance to promoting cooperation with countries of ESCAP region, and of course, we are looking forward to deepening our cooperation with our existing partner. The government of Azerbaijan has initiated a number of big projects in the field of energy, transport, and ICT, which aim at strengthening our existing cooperation in our region. Located on strategic crossroads of East and West, Azerbaijan is open to potential new initiative on expansion of inter-regional energy connectivity and bringing Central Asia closer to European energy architecture. Here I have to mention Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline, Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum gas pipeline, and of course recently commissioned one of the biggest energy projects in the world, Southern Gas Corridor, which connects these two parts of the world. Madam Chair, in the current period, the policy of diversification is one of the important elements for every country, especially rich with oil and gas. And being a landlocked country, Azerbaijan participated actively in regional connectivity projects such as East and West, North-South, West-North transport corridor. We're becoming one of the Eurasian main and reliable transport and logistic hubs. Together with our partners, we connected Azerbaijan transport infrastructure with Laps-Lazuri transport corridor and created broad opportunities for multilateral cooperation in the area of transportation. Madam Chair, we're expanding our information transit capabilities. Agreements have been signed with Kazakhstan, with Turkmenistan on fiber optic cable line along the bottom of Caspian Sea. This project will give a new impetus to realization of our TASIM project initiated by Azerbaijan, which essential part of APIS, Asia Pacific Information Superhighway project. Madam Chair, the global pandemic has been affected all countries, and as we see, no country is secure against it. And Azerbaijan also took prompt measures to eliminate it. In our republic, we have adopted a broad social economic package in order to ensure macroeconomic and financial stability in our country. But we see that the scale and complexity of this problem demand a coordinated global approach, that the countries, regardless of their size, regardless of their resource, can manage COVID-19 alone. The close partnership is essential. Azerbaijan is among the first countries to mobilize global efforts against the COVID-19. We initiated the summit of Turkish Council on April 2020, the summit of Non-Alignment Movement on May 2020, and the special session of United Nations General Assembly at the level of head of states and head of governments in December 2020. Honoring its international responsibility, Azerbaijan has made voluntarily contribution to the WHO in the amount of $10 million. We have also provided direct humanitarian aid and financial assistance to more than 30 countries in the fight with the coronavirus. In the condition of pandemic, it's important to maintain open trade between our countries, and in this term, Azerbaijan, a reliable transit partner, provides unhindered traffic transit through its territory. Of course, we are also committed to SDG. The Coordination Council was established, and now I can say that at the political forum of the United Nations General Economic and Social Council to be held on July 2021, Azerbaijan will provide the third voluntarily national report, thus becoming the first country in the region to submit such report for the third time. Madam Chair, I would like to draw your attention and attention of all distinguished delegates that with the liberation of occupied territories of Azerbaijan and trilateral statement signed by the leader of Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Russia, the work in unblocking all transport and communication links in our region is well underway. We are now working on realization of Zangezur transportation project, which will be an integral part of the East and West transport corridor connecting Asia and Europe through Azerbaijan. Of course, opening of this communication will be in the benefit of all regional countries and will bring the new dynamic of our region, which eventually will lead to narrowing inequalities that I have mentioned in the beginning of my speech within the country and, of course, between the countries of our region. In conclusion, Madam Chair, we do believe that ESCAP will continue to play active role in promoting cooperation in the region to address existing challenges and coordinating joint efforts its member states for the benefits of the region as a whole. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Azerbaijan, for your statement. The next speaker is Hong Kong, China, Mr. Lee Sheng Yuan, Director, Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office in Bangkok, to be followed by the Republic of Korea and then Armenia. Hong Kong, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Madam Chairman, Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Hong Kong China HKC delegation, I congratulate the government of Thailand and ESCAP Secretariat on the very successful organization of this meeting, despite we are battling another viral wave in the past 2 weeks. The COVID-19 pandemic is spreading far and wide around the globe. Despite the rollout of vaccination worldwide, the road to recovery still remains long and bumpy. Regional cooperation is therefore imperative to mitigate the impact of the pandemic and support post-pandemic recovery efforts. As a founding member of the World Trade Organization and a separate customs territory, HKC is committed to maintain our free market policy and supporting progressive trade liberalization. During this critical time, it is of utmost importance to keep our boundaries open and refrain from erecting unjustified trade barriers or resorting to irrationality in trade policies. Domestically, HKC has been adopting a comprehensive, multi-pronged, and coordinated approach to contain the spread of COVID-19 and protect the health of the community while maintaining HKC's position as an international city and logistical hub. In safeguarding the economy, our priority is to strengthen resilience, maintain market and financial stability, and restore growth. To this end, we have implemented various relief measures and pledged over $38.5 billion, which is 11% of our GDP, to help offset the economic fallout from COVID-19. HKC has been exploring bilateral talks with various economies in the region about reopening borders. A travel bubble mechanism between Singapore and Hong Kong has been worked out by both sides since November 2020. Subject to the pandemic control and vaccination rates in HKC and Singapore, we look forward to proceeding with the implementation of this travel bubble arrangement from 26th of May. Hong Kong stands ready to reopen discussion on future travel bubble arrangements with other economies at bilateral level. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought us unprecedented challenges last year. It is now high time to turn to a new chapter and revive with full strength. Given the challenges ahead, there is no room for isolation or protectionism. Hong Kong is glad to share our experiences today and stands ready to join hands with all economies to contribute to the economic recovery in the region and ride over the challenges united. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Hong Kong, China, for your statement. The next speaker is the Republic of Korea, Vice Minister Choi Jong-moon of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to be followed by Armenia and then OECD. Korea, you have the floor.
Armida Ali Shabana, Executive Secretary, as well as all the UN ESCAP staff for organizing this event. So, Madam Chair, the coronavirus has indeed transformed many aspects of our daily lives across the world, and the Asia-Pacific region is no exception. We all struggle to build back better and step forward to meet the post-COVID-19 era. I'd like to take this opportunity to present 3 points which will help bolster the sense of solidarity and cooperation across the region. First, we should expand and deepen cooperation for the digital transformation in the Asia-Pacific region. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated a shift to a non-face-to-face interaction. The Republic of Korea, as a digital powerhouse, adopted the Digital New Deal policy. On the same note, Korea is expanding its ODA in the digital area to contribute to strengthening innovation capabilities in the region. For instance, the Smart Transport System project using digital technology has been brought by the Korea ESCAP Fund. Second, we need to promote a sustainable green recovery and expand cooperation to respond to climate change. The Republic of Korea will host the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit in May. This summit will muster the international community's commitment to carbon neutrality and market-based partnerships to build a sustainable future. I look forward to the active participation from Asia-Pacific countries. Third, we should strengthen our cooperation to protect our vast regional marine environment. Environment is one of the 8 work programs in UN ESCAP, and many ESCAP members share the valuable ocean ecosystem of the Pacific. In this light, I am very concerned that recent decision by the Japanese government to discharge the contaminated water into the ocean can have a serious adverse impact on human health and environment in the region. The United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea says that countries should take all measures to ensure activities under their jurisdiction are carried out not to cause damage by pollution. Also, they should cooperate to exchange information about pollution. That is why the Korean government has requested Japan to ensure that its measures should be in line with the global standards by providing sufficient scientific grounds and sharing information, having enough consultations with the stakeholders in advance to ensure transparency, and guaranteeing Korea and stakeholders' participation in the IA's safety verification process. So, Madam Chair, in the middle of the pandemic, the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has become an even more challenging task. The leadership demonstrated by ESCAP is vital. Korea will continue to cooperate with other member states so that together we can build back better and inclusive Asia-Pacific region. Thank you.
Thank you, Republic of Korea, for your statement. The next speaker is Armenia, Mr. Arman Kachatrian, Head, Department of Multilateral Policy and Development Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Armenia. And should there be no other country delegation who would like to speak, we could already proceed to opening the floor for organizations. So the next in line would be OECD. Armenia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, as rightly highlighted in the theme study of this session, the unprecedented global health crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and its socio-economic consequences threaten to roll back hard-won development gains. It has been more than a year since the pandemic started, yet the world still lives in uncertainty. The immunization process is lagging behind. The timely achievement of SDGs is under serious question. Today, we all agree that building back better is possible through cooperation on regional and international levels. To this end, the United Nations system has played a critical role in streamlining the global response to COVID-19. Armenia has been a staunch supporter of strong international cooperation through relevant organizations, particularly the WHO, in coping with this global scourge. Armenia has joined a number of multilateral initiatives, including the COVAX facility. On the national level, the government of Armenia adopted more than 20 programs aimed at mitigating the socio-economic consequences of the pandemic, helping the vulnerable groups of the population and the business affected the most. The proper functioning of multilateral institutions requires the long-term commitment of member states to shared values and goals. In fact, international solidarity is the prerequisite for collective actions. Unfortunately, not all countries share this vision. On September 27, 2020, in flagrant violation of the United Nations Secretary General's appeal for immediate global ceasefire, the Azerbaijani armed forces, with the direct involvement of Turkey and its supported foreign terrorist fighters, launched a large-scale pre-planned military aggression against Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. The massive use of force by Azerbaijan took 44 days and led to thousands of casualties, war crimes, and ethnic cleansing, tens of thousands of displaced persons in Nagorno-Karabakh. Thousands of Armenian cultural heritage objects are now endangered. Some of them have already been destroyed or vandalized. Today, about 6 months after the ceasefire has been established by the trilateral statement, Azerbaijan continues to undermine international efforts to address the humanitarian consequences of the war. Azerbaijan blocks access of humanitarian assistance to Nagorno-Karabakh, continues to hold in captivity numerous prisoners of war in gross violation of the international humanitarian law, while celebrating violence, racism, and dehumanization of ethnic Armenians in the so-called military trophy park in Baku, which bears a most striking resemblance to the Nazi-era propaganda imagery. Azerbaijan has not been merely justifying the use of force, a preeminent obligation under international law, but also claiming that it resolved the conflict through the force and created new realities on the ground, as we have heard from yesterday's statement of the President of Azerbaijan in this very platform. Realities created by the use of force cannot be legitimate. Moreover, in his recent statement, Azerbaijani President refers to creating a so-called Zangezur corridor, putting territorial claims to Armenia and threatening to use force. This rhetoric is utterly unacceptable and seriously undermines regional peace and stability. These claims are groundless from the perspective of either history or international law and contradict to the trilateral statement of November 9. From the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Armenia has been vocal in its support to relevant multilateral institutions that should facilitate cooperation and make it possible to leave no one behind. All essential health products to combat the virus must be available to all, particularly the vaccine against COVID-19, which are a global public good. Accordingly, no one should be denied or limited in access to the vaccinations, including those living in conflict areas such as people of Nagorno-Karabakh. To conclude, I would like to reiterate that Armenia stays committed to the SDGs implementation and remains a strong advocate of regional cooperation, which is instrumental for leaving the pandemic behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Armenia. There being no further requests to speak from country delegations, we now open the floor for organizations that have registered to speak under this agenda item. So the first speaker is OECD, Mr. Andreas Scholl, Director of OECD Global Relations, to be followed by the International Transport Forum, and then to be followed by the International Monetary Fund. OECD, you have the floor. Oh, you're muted. OECD, please unmute.
Yeah, Madam Chair, apologies.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Dear Secretary General, Under Secretary General, dear distinguished delegates, we are now 1 year in the COVID-19 pandemic, and in this context, all dimensions of the economic social impact for our economies and societies have become more apparent. At the OECD, we project in our latest economic outlook that global GDP can bounce back by 5.6% in 2021 and 4.0% in 2022, but the near-term economic outlook remains uncertain. This recovery depends crucially on two factors. First, the speed and scope of the most ambitious vaccination effort in human history in all your countries, in all our countries. And second, on continued fiscal effort and structural reform efforts to implement the recovery plans. This global recovery, dear delegates, is a truly global effort, and we can and must work together to put global development paths and the economy back on track and build together strong, resilient, green, and inclusive economies and societies. Just one example what we can do together, and this is based on the renewed OECD ESCAP Memorandum of Understanding in 2019, which provides an opportunity to further collaborate in areas of inclusiveness, green recovery to achieve these goals. We have tried to strengthen our regional cooperation in the context of the pandemic. We have been working with member and partner countries in Asia Pacific, which is a region of top priority for the OECD. Through our Southeast Asia regional program, our Eurasia competitiveness programs, we have fostered regional integration structural reforms which can contribute to this resilient and inclusive recovery we need. This includes our support for the ASEAN's Comprehensive Recovery Framework, APEX Putrajaya Vision 2040, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and last but not least, also the Paris Agreement. At a country level, in addition to our members in the region, Australia, Japan, Korea, New Zealand, our collaboration focuses on and has been significantly deepened through our relationship with our key partners in the region, China, India, Indonesia, country programs, Kazakhstan, Thailand, soon Vietnam. Our standards bodies contribute to global forum, including ESCAP, APEC, and the G20 are helping to deliver common solutions to shared concerns. Fighting equality, climate change, tackling back private trade and investment distortions. Dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chair, as we emerge from this crisis, we see 4 priorities in our joint efforts together. Firstly, we need to work and strengthen our efforts investing in education and skills development. This means going digital in all schools, boosting productivity, enabling upskill and reskill programs to support people throughout the transition process. So we need to put the people in the center together. To emphasize this priority, the OECD and the government of Thailand will organize our Southeast Asia Regional Forum, focusing on human capital development in Southeast Asia, fostering competitiveness to build back better next month. You're all invited on the 20th of May. We look forward to the participation of ESCAP to this timely discussion. Second, we need to enhance our global cooperation and coordination in fora such as G20, APEC, ASEAN, as they will be important to keep international trade and investment flowing. In collaboration with ESCAP and IBAN, we have developed in this context guidelines for the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN, which were endorsed by the ASEAN economic ministers last year. Lastly, and also very importantly, green recovery programs and plans must play a central role to both deliver on our climate and our other environmental targets while boosting jobs, incomes, and economic growth. The OECD is working, and we put this as an offer to you all, in a new international program for action on climate to help countries to reach the longer-term climate goals. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chair, this crisis provides us also with an opportunity to rethink, to rebuild, and to reinvigorate our international cooperation more sustainably, more inclusively. Count on the OECD. We stand ready to support you in this effort. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair. Looking forward to seeing you in person next time.
Thank you, OECD. The next speaker is the Secretary General of the International Transport Forum, Mr. Yong Tae Kim, to be followed by the International Monetary Fund and then by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, or UNDRR. Mr. Kim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear Under-Secretary General, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be participating in ESCAP's 77th session today. This is the first time the International Transport Forum is participating as ESCAP's official observer, and I'm looking forward to many other opportunities where we will be able to contribute to ESCAP's priorities and focus areas. The theme of building back better from crisis through regional cooperation in Asia and the Pacific is a topic that we have been developing jointly with ESCAP, focusing on the transport sector over the past year. Through our collaboration, I'm proud to see that we have developed a set of guidelines to support the creation of a resilient and sustainable transport connectivity recovery pathway in ASEAN during and post-COVID-19 to help the region build back better. These guidelines include resilient and sustainable measures for transport connectivity on a systematic, infrastructural, and model level. Associated institutional arrangements and regional cooperation are also critical elements for successful implementation of the guidelines. The guidelines define 3 priority areas. Priority 1 is to ensure transport workers' safety and training. Priority 2 is to preserve connectivity for efficient and resilient supply chains. Priority 3 is to build back better through digital, resilient, and decarbonized transport connectivity. These 3 areas will require strong regional cooperation to succeed. I hope that through the joint collaboration between ESCAP and ITF, we can help foster the collection and sharing of knowledge, lessons learned, and experience from the COVID-19 pandemic directly or indirectly related to transport connectivity and resilience, as well as to determine and provide guide principles on the implementation of future policies and recommendations, especially based on information collected in order to build more resilient and sustainable transport connectivity in Asia and the Pacific. Through our cooperation, I also hope that we can provide a platform to ensure the exchange of relevant information and instructions in a timely manner to keep all stakeholders well informed for effective, efficient, and enhanced cooperation in the region. Lastly, I would also like to share a recent publication of an ITF Compendium on COVID-19 and transport, which was created to serve as a practical guide for transport stakeholders. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, the ITF has served as a global platform for sharing information and policy insights on the transport sector's responses to COVID-19 related challenges. The ITF continues to carry forward global policy dialogue for better transport and to help governments build an evidence-based policy framework for better decisions in these difficult times. The ITF led this course on transport in COVID-19 will continue in the lead up to and during the 2021 ITF Summit on Transport Innovation for Sustainable Development, Reshaping Mobility in the Wake of COVID-19 to be held in May 2021. I welcome and hope to see you all, if not many of you, at our annual summit in May, where we can continue to develop transport and cross-sectoral measures that can help us build it better. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, ITF. The next speaker is IMF, Mr. Chikahisa Sumi, Director of the IMF's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, to be followed by the UNDRR and then by International Atomic Energy Agency. IMF, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the International Monetary Fund would like to thank ESCAP for the opportunity to discuss our world economic outlook. It is now over 1 year since COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, a year of terrible loss of lives and livelihood. The world's GDP shrunk by 3.3% in 2020, the largest since the Great Depression. However, thanks to vaccines, there is now hope of defeating this pandemic. The global outlook has also improved, and we are upgrading growth for the 2021 to 6%. Of course, uncertainty remains high on virus and vaccine dynamics and on the effectiveness of policy support and the evolution of financial conditions. The recovery is partial in that the GDP level is still lower than the pre-pandemic projections, but thanks to large policy support, these losses are smaller than after the global financial crisis. The recovery is also divergent. Unlike in the global financial crisis, when advanced economies had the largest output losses, this time, emerging markets and lower income countries are projected to suffer larger losses. Divergent recoveries across countries could lead to unexpected policy spillovers. For example, the accelerated US recovery through policy support is expected to have a net positive effect on global economy through especially positive spillovers to its main trading partners, but could have negative spillover through rising interest rates and volatile capital flows for some countries. Emerging market economies and developing countries need to face this policy challenge along with the other issues already present, including those on heightened public and private debt levels and lasting supply-side scars. Policy responses should be tailored to the nature of the shock and to a country's circumstances, including to the country's role in the global supply chain and the country's institutional settings. The IMF is ready to assist countries to tailor their policy responses through our policy advice, financial assistance as needed, and capacity development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, IMF, for your statement. The next speaker is the Chief of the UNDRR, Mr. Marco Toscano Rivalta, to be followed by the International Atomic Energy Agency and then by the United Nations Environment Program. UNDRR, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, distinguished delegates and colleagues, it is really an honor for me to address the Commission for the first time. The United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reductions, UNDRR, welcomes and congratulates ESCAP for the publication of the theme study for the 77th Commission session, Beyond the Pandemic, Building Back Better from Crisis in Asia and the Pacific. We fully support the policy recommendations made in the theme study, which confirm and provide additional significance evidence to many of the recommendations that emerged from the series of webinars and accompanying briefs organized by UNDRR in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly those around the need to expand and strengthen social protections to leave no one behind, promote green resilience and recoveries, build resilience across business and supply chains, and maintain the balance between human activity and nature. Moreover, its central recommendation of enhancing regional cooperation is key, since countries are lagging in achieving Target F of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which calls for increasing international cooperation to developing countries. Moving forward, it is clear that COVID-19 has exposed gaps in how countries plan for and manage their disaster risk. To prevent the occurrence of another disaster of this scale, it is critical that countries re-examine their current disaster risk governance mechanisms to ensure that they are multi-hazard in scope, involve all relevant sectors and institutions, as well as other stakeholders, and address the needs of all members of society, including the most vulnerable. Priority 4 of the Sendai Framework is expressly focused on building back better and provides significant guidance for a resilient recovery. To this end, UNDRR stands ready to support countries to revise or develop their national and local disaster risk reduction strategies and ensure the integration of the biohazard as recommended in the 2016 Bangkok Principles for the implementation of the health aspects of the Sendai Framework, and therefore to safeguard development gains. To build back better from COVID-19, in December 2020, UNDRR convened the Asia-Pacific Partnerships for Disaster Risk Reduction to capture the region's priorities around building resilience. UNDRR is incorporating those priorities in the draft Asia-Pacific Action Plan 2022-2024 for the implementation of the Sendai Framework. To ensure regional ownership and engagement in the plan, UNDRR will engage with countries and stakeholders through a series of consultations in the coming weeks. I thank you.
Thank you, UNDRR, for your statement. The next speaker is the International Atomic Energy Agency, Ms. Jane Gerardo Abaya, Director, Division for Asia and the Pacific, Department of Technical Cooperation, to be followed by United Nations Environment Program, and then by Transport Corridor Europe, Caucasus, Asia. So, International Atomic Energy Agency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The International Atomic Energy Agency works with its member states and partners across the globe to help countries use nuclear science and technology to meet their development challenges through its technical cooperation program. For many of the key challenges facing us today, namely climate change, food and energy security, pollution of the oceans and seas, and human health. Nuclear science and technology remain highly relevant in the efforts to attain sustainable development goals and even in emergency response for pandemics such as COVID-19. In response to the growing number of requests for assistance in the rapid detection of COVID-19, the IAEA procured and delivered to member states diagnostic kits that use nuclear-derived techniques, the real-time RT-PCR, through a technical cooperation project, the largest in the IAEA's history. The IAEA successfully delivered equipment and consumables to support testing for COVID-19 to 128 countries and territories, which, according to survey, enabled testing of 28 million people. Support also included webinar series,
training, quality assurance in COVID-19 testing laboratories, and ensuring continued supply of alternative reagents. Stemming from the IAEA's long-standing experience in supporting member states in zoonotic disease outbreak, the IAEA Director General, Mr. Rafael Grossi, launched the Zoonotic Disease Integrated Action, ZODIAC project, an initiative to enhance global response preparedness against possible future outbreaks of zoonotic diseases. ZODIAC includes a new inter-regional technical cooperation project which will build global, regional, and national capabilities for the surveillance, detection, and control of emerging or re-emerging zoonotic diseases. Plastic pollution is another global challenge the world is facing, threatening ecosystems, imperiling food safety, and affecting human health. The IAEA contributes to address plastic pollution using nuclear and nuclear-derived techniques on two fronts: plastic recycling and marine monitoring of microplastic. A roundtable for Asia and the Pacific region on nuclear techniques to address plastic pollution, NUTEC, will be held on May 18 this year to highlight the IAEA research and technical cooperation projects in plastic recycling using radiation technology and marine monitoring microplastics using isotopic tracing techniques, which are available in several countries in Asia and the Pacific. With the cooperation of UNEP, ESCAP, and the ASEAN, the roundtable shall provide a platform for presentation and discussion of new solutions to plastic pollution, with a particular focus on the unique contributions of nuclear technologies, and promote collaborative partnerships for an integrated, coordinated, and solution-oriented approach in the fight against plastic pollution. It is important to engage, collaborate, and synergize. South-South cooperation, triangular collaboration, and regional cooperation have effectively supported the development efforts of the IAEA member states. The IAEA, through its mandate, stand ready to collaborate with ESCAP to extend our cooperation on mutually shared important topics. We look forward to a comprehensive and converging actions to address current and emerging challenges. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies.
Thank you, IAEA, for your statement. Before we proceed to UNEP, I would like to now give the floor to the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Turkey, Her Excellency Evren Akgun. Excellency, you have the floor now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
But you don't see me,
But you
right?
don't have a video. We just hear you.
Thank you so much. One moment, please. Yes.
There, we can see you now. Please proceed.
Madam Chair, thank you much. And I would like to wish a good afternoon and good morning to everyone who is with us now today. The theme topic, Building Back Better from Crisis Through Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific, is of utmost importance. And we have been hearing some very valuable views today and also yesterday, obviously. I would like to, however, respond or, well, I wanted to take the floor in relation to the remarks by the representative of Armenia, where we actually saw an opposite sentiment to regional cooperation in terms of what has been happening in the past. As you know, despite 4 UN Security Council resolutions, namely 822, 853, 874, 884, all of them have called for the immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal of occupying forces of Armenia from Azerbaijani territory. And despite all these calls, including OSCE decisions, for 30 years, Armenia continued to occupy almost 20% of Azerbaijan territory in total disregard of international law. I'd like to underline here that Azerbaijan used its right of self-defense in order to protect its people and its territorial integrity, conducting an operation inside its own territory. Turkey reiterated its support to Azerbaijan in the face of Armenian aggression, its blatant attacks on civilians, and its occupation of Azerbaijani territories. So Turkey's support to Azerbaijan is not only based, or was not only based on Turkey's special bonds with Azerbaijan, but also based on international law. In terms of what has been said today that did not necessarily correspond to our topic at hand, Armenian allegations about Turkey and about foreign terrorist fighters are completely baseless. On the contrary, Azerbaijan has repeatedly pointed out that Armenia was using so-called voluntary fighters and mercenaries from third countries during the conflict. Voluntary military formations, such as Voluntary Mountain Infantry Battalion, provided military training to diaspora Armenians from several countries to take part in the fighting, and these cannot be sugar-coated. This is clearly against international law, and countries of origin, including those in Europe, should take steps to investigate all these unlawful activities. During the clashes, there were credible reports about terrorists being transformed from Iraq to Yerevan. Without further ado, I'd just like to urge all of you to take a look at the notes Azerbaijan distributed in the UN, OSCE, Council of Europe, and other international organizations regarding this issue. Azerbaijan has effectively denied allegations about foreign fighters and stated they did not need such foreign fighters. So I just wanted this to come to your attention, and I wish all of us a very productive meeting for the rest of our deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey, for the statement. Our next speaker is UNEP, Senior Program Management Officer of UNEP, Mr. Zhang Shigang, to be followed by the Transport Corridor Europe, Caucasus Asia, and then by ESCAP Sustainable Business Network, or ESBN. UNEP, you have the floor. It seems we have a problem with UNEP, so we may now proceed with Traseka. Mr. Aset Azavbayev, Secretary General of the Permanent Secretariat Intergovernmental Commission of Traseka. Traseka, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Уважаемый господин председатель, уважаемые участники, благодарю за представленное слово. С начала пандемии мы все стали свидетелями принятия ограничительных мер на национальном уровне для защиты населения стран от вируса. Таким образом, национальные требования вышли на первый план, и ряд ограничений стали серьезными барьерами на пути международных перевозок, в том числе транзитных, несмотря на нормы международных конвенций в сфере перевозок грузов. Принятые ограничительные меры отличались низким уровнем гармонизации с мерами, принятыми в сопредельных государствах. В отдельных странах транспорт на границе простаивал длительное время, что привело к задержкам доставки грузов и срывам контрактов из-за нарушения целостности цепочек поставок. Большинство стран мира столкнулось не только с ограничением грузовых и пассажирских перевозок, а также с падением объема внешней торговли и со снижением деловой активности и отраслей экономики на национальном уровне, что по сей день требует принятия активных мер по поддержке, в том числе транспортной отрасли. Вся эта ситуация показала, что на сегодня на международном уровне нет четкого механизма регулирования перевозок в неопределенных или даже чрезвычайных условиях, включая пандемию, который мог бы минимизировать негативные последствия на перевозки и обеспечить осуществление слаженных процедур на границе. Для этого постоянным секретариатом Тросека были разработаны и одобрены странами-участницами согласованные условия перевозок в период пандемии, которые направлены на максимально гармонизированные процедуры пересечения границ. В целом, текущие условия показывают, что фокус приоритетов при разработке дополнений действующие международные договора должны быть смещены в сторону обеспечения гармонизированных и стандартизированных действий при возникновении различных ситуаций, где свобода транзита и отказ от ограничительных мер будут обеспечены в первую очередь. Цифровизация процессов перевозок и пересечения границ является важным шагом на пути обеспечения устойчивого транспортного сообщения, что ранее также неоднократно озвучивалось на различных международных площадках, включая ООН. Данный вопрос приобретает особую актуальность и востребованность в свете предстоящих очередных ограничительных мер, связанных с требованием по подтверждению факта вакцинирования лиц, пересекающих границы. При этом хочу отметить, что дальнейшее развитие цифровых решений отдельно на каждом виде транспорта не позволит достигнуть желаемого результата. В данном контексте важно выработать единый подход по двум вопросам. Первое – это переход на цифровое решение для всех видов транспорта на международном уровне. Должен быть гармонизирован, чтобы сократить разрывы во внедрении информационных технологий в процессе перевозок. И, во-вторых, дополнение к цифровизации процедур перевозок важен перевод пунктов пропуска в цифровой формат. Таким образом, важно не только перейти на цифровизацию, а обеспечить скоординированные действия к переходу и организации процессов на всем протяжении перевозки грузов в цифровом формате. Со своей стороны, постоянный секретариат МПК Тросека готовы внести посильный вклад в данном направлении. В завершение хочу еще раз выразить благодарность организаторов и участников за возможность обсуждения вопроса, от которого зависит в том числе будущее устойчивого транспорта. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you, Traseka. Our next speaker is Mr. Lee George Lam, Chair of ESCAP Sustainable Business Network Executive Council. May I now ask the conference room officer to play the video, please?
Distinguished delegates, we are facing a great challenge from global climate change, economic crisis, and particularly the COVID-19 pandemic. We must build back better and smarter from crisis, taking stewardship of a great transition to a new era of sustainable and inclusive development. Following our region's development achievements of recent decades, we are confident that Asia and the Pacific can develop the vision and the long-term strategic thinking necessary to achieve its next challenge, a transformation towards a sustainable and inclusive economy. The ESCAP Sustainable Business Network urges businesses in Asia and the Pacific to do three things. First, pledge full support for the UN Global Compact and environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, principles, aligning business strategy with sustainability, including the transition to net zero greenhouse gas emissions and net zero non-biodegradable waste. Second, commit to more research, development, and innovation now for stronger, sustainable, and smarter solutions. Third, advocate to governments and communities to make the transition to a sustainable and inclusive economy. Together, we can achieve this through regional cooperation and concerted efforts centered around four critical interconnected areas: broadening social protection, investing in a sustainable recovery, strengthening connectivity and supply chains, and mending a broken relationship with nature. We welcome partnership for action to build back better from crisis.
Thank you, ESBN, for your statement. The next speaker is Mr. Zhang Shigang, Senior Program Management Officer of UNEP. UNEP, you have the floor.
Yes, madam. Thank you, madam. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight some of key issues and opportunities related to the environmental dimension of building back better from crisis through regional cooperation in Asia and Pacific, and the relevant regional forums to support member states and the Commission to do this. As many of your ministers noted that the recent UN Environmental Assembly leadership dialogues held in February this year, the pandemic is both a threat and an opportunity. It has exposed our vulnerabilities and it is undermining the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. But it also provides an opportunity for all of us. We now have the chance to put in place a green recovery that will transform our relations with nature and heals our planet. Countries in Asia-Pacific region depend on natural resources for jobs, livelihood, health, and well-being. We need to protect these valuable resources as we emerge from the pandemic. We must work to ensure that the recovery package, along with our economies, with the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and international processes that target healthy biodiversity. We need to invest much more in green energy, green transport, green building upgrade and energy efficiency, natural capital, green researches and development. UNEP would like to highlight some of regional intergovernmental and expert platforms that can provide platforms for cooperation and building back greener and better in ways that address these environmental challenges. In addition to Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, and indeed this Commission meeting, I would like to highlight that the fourth Forum of Ministers and Environment Authorities for Asia-Pacific is now scheduled from 5th to 8th October 2021 in Suwon City, hosted by the Republic of Korea. This will provide a platform to review and identify actions for nature to achieve the SDGs in the context of COVID recovery. In addition, Regional Ministers Forum on Environment and Health, which brings together ministers from environment and ministers from health, and is jointly supported by UNEP and WHO, can provide a space for addressing this nexus between environment and health in the recovery. UNEP is also pleased to support a number of thematic environmental platforms, and we engage member states and we encourage member states to engage in these exchanges, good practices and lessons learned as we build back greener and better. These platforms include the Asia-Pacific Adaptation Network and its associated forum, which many of you participated in this year in March. Sustainable Rice Platform, the East Asia Acid Deposition Network, the coordinating body for the Sea of East Asia, so on and so forth. I'm also pleased to note that the biannual UNEP Finance Initiative Regional Roundtable on Sustainable Finance for Asia Pacific will be held as a virtual event on 1st to 3rd June 2021. The virtual event will help define the role of banking, insurance, investment in shaping ambitious, responsible, and sustainable strategies to proactively address the challenges and opportunities of a green recovery whilst transitioning to a low-carbon, inclusive, and sustainable future in Asia-Pacific. Madam Chair, UNEP looks forward to support the future engagement of member states and the broader UN system in all of these platforms and make our joint efforts in achieving the environmental dimension of the SDGs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, UNEP, for the statement. So this brings us to the conclusion of discussions under Agenda Item 2A, Building Back Better from Crises through Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific, general debate on the theme topic. The meeting is adjourned. We will resume the discussion tomorrow, Wednesday, 28th of April at 10:00 hours Bangkok time sharp, to take up Agenda Item 2B on the sub-regional perspectives on the theme topic. Thank you very much.